Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. One of the most popular borough presidents ever is my guest today. Gale Brewer, the former council member from the Upper West Side, wins elections with overwhelming majorities, justified because she works so hard to improve the lives of her constituents and the communities they live in. She is truly a public servant in its highest form, and she's my guest today. And welcome.
I'm delighted to be here.
Do they really do they call you Madam President?
People do, and they know I don't like it, so then I say, please call me Gale. And then next time they see me, they go.
That's so funny. I love it when people do that. So you, are you happy with your new job?
You know, the best part is a great staff. We have two deputy borough presidents, a great chief of staff, and we're working to make sure that every community board has somebody whom they can relate to. We brought over folks who know about land use from the city council. And then we hired a very diverse staff. So it's about a little between 50 and 60 people. And it is exciting to be working with this group of individuals, and I hope we can make a difference.
You're known for having interns. Do you have room for them?
We have so much room.
Okay. And you also are doing something a little different by opening a new office up in the top part of the borough in a storefront.
Yes, traditionally the Manhattan Borough President has always had an office at 1 Center Street near City Hall, and we have an office there. And the borough president traditionally has had one at the Harlem State Office Building, Adam Clayton Powell. You know, but I was in there with Mary Ann Krupczak in 1974. So
when she was the lieutenant governor.
When she was the lieutenant governor. And so I want not to be in that building. I would like to be in a storefront. So yes, we're working on a storefront on 125th Street that'll be open 7 days a week to the community. You can just walk in.
You're a very accessible public servant, right?
I like to be accessible, and I love storefronts.
I know you do. One of the major responsibilities of our borough president are the community boards. And they're quite large. How many are there in the borough?
There are 12 in the borough, and there are 50 individuals who are volunteers. They're up every 2 years, so you have nobody's up all the time, and so you keep 25 people permanently.
It's a rotating thing,
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And they're charged, they do, I mean, they're your eyes and ears basically, right? In the neighborhood that they represent.
We've already had some great meetings with them. We met with borough board members. The first meeting was on technology. Of course, I love to try to.
Next subject.
It is, and it's trying to get all this open data to be available to them, because you can have all this information, but does it actually get used? And I think they were so excited that somebody's going to help them do that, and they're already trying to think of, and we brought in about 15 volunteer technologists who know how to do mapping and know how to take data.
So you talk, I mean, you are the queen of government technology. What does that really mean? Let's go really basic.
I appreciate that, because people don't. The issue is if you are a community board and you have to plan for a developer who's come in and says they're going to give you all this, great stuff, and this size apartment, and they're going to do affordable housing and so on. You want to be able to look at the demographics of your area, and you want to be able to do it on a map. How many seniors, how many people graduated, how many people don't have jobs, and then you want to be able to overlay that with their income, and then you want to be able to overlay that with the affordable housing units that exist in that neighborhood, and overlay that with the condos and the co-ops. That's what you can do with people who will help you with the technology. So, but you can't do it by yourself. So we're going to actually bring people in to work to develop the maps with all 12 community boards. And then they can keep going. The second thing that you can do with technology, with help, is you can take the bill that I passed, the open data bill, which is online, nyc.gov/data, but I don't know if I could figure it all out. It has got every database from the city of New York, housing, social services, environmental protection, but it's good data, but you need somebody to map it. So that's what they'll also do, and to analyze it, so it goes on a spreadsheet, or it says, I'm making this up, we have, so many noise complaints there, and they're in these buildings. And you can look at your neighborhood like with data, so that the next time a developer comes, you can say, this is what we need. We need this kind of commercial.
It's interesting.
We have a lot of senior citizens, so we need some studios. So we have a lot of families, so we need 2 bedrooms.
We need another school.
We need another school, exactly.
And what's magic about it also is that an individual person can also access have access to this data
Absolutely.
without totally knowing it. But if you wanted to know, like, should we have a different street light with a different timing or something? If you want to know the accidents, if you want to know all that, that's all available, isn't
It's
it?
all available, and
It's amazing.
unfortunately, because of so many deaths, because of cars, particularly on the west side, horrible. There is this issue on Vision Zero, and we want no more fatalities. So that's another thing that the community boards can do. We had a meeting with all of them to say, where are your hot spots? Because they're the eyes and ears, like you said. So they know at 155th on Broadway, it's dangerous. I made up the location. But then they can layer that, and then they can say, okay, these are the police statistics. These are all the places that we think are dangerous. And they can say, okay, this is where the police have had accident reports. And then you could see where there's a real hot spot.
You represent Manhattan, which when you were in the city council, you must have had the same. We served the same district, different times.
I tried to fill your big shoes,
please
which
stop.
I did not, Ronnie
Oh,
Eldridge.
stop, that's ridiculous.
It
But
is
anyway,
true.
it is ridiculous. But you know the attitude of members of the outer boroughs with Manhattan.
Yes, I'm learning them even more now.
Now, do you ever meet with the other borough presidents?
Yes, we do. In fact, we're meeting today with the Chancellor Farina, and we had
All the borough presidents
all
together?
the borough presidents together.
interesting.
And we met with the borough president of the Bronx, of course, is the senior borough president, because he was there already.
Yeah.
The rest, all four of us are new.
Yeah.
So he invited us, and we went up to the Bronx.
Great.
And had a wonderful lunch, and we're going to do it on a regular basis. And I love the other borough presidents.
That's great. And I love the idea that you all get together, because I don't think that really happened in the past.
I don't think in any substantive way.
Yeah.
They kind of joked around.
So people think that everybody in Manhattan is rich, right? That we, I don't know what they think of it. They think we're very strange.
Yeah, they don't understand that we're just like everybody else.
Exactly. So they think of it always as a borough of a central business district. And that makes it a little difficult, doesn't it, for you?
It does. I mean, it is frustrating, and I'm very respectful and like very much our new mayor, de Blasio, but when he wears the Brooklyn T-shirt all the time, I wish he would wear a T-shirt that says New York City. Manhattan is a place where people come in for work, and then 1.7 million sleep here at night, plus all the visitors. And you have a huge number of New York City Housing Authority apartments. You have still many number, thank goodness, of rent-regulated apartments. And we hope to build more affordable apartments. We have a lot of single-room occupancy. We are a multi-family, multi-income city. And obviously, in the Lower East Side and above 96th Street, there is a great deal of poverty.
And there's also a great deal of gentrification of those areas. Are you afraid that we're losing the ability to allow people with low incomes to stay in this borough?
I think it's a big concern. Today's New York Times has some stories about it, and it's been ongoing. I would love to see this administration do what the last didn't successfully, which is preserve the affordable that we have. You always hear about building new, but we cannot lose one more unit that we have. And I could talk about that. And then, of course, we have to find out in Manhattan, where there's less land, and therefore it costs more, how we can still keep the middle class and working class in Manhattan with new housing.
And the builders are anxious always to build high buildings, high rents, or high ownership buildings. That seems to be. So we're vulnerable, I think, and especially when the mayor has announced this policy.
It made me a little nervous. I talked to some wonderful.
Build.
I know. I've talked to some wonderful developers to point out that we actually need rentals. 250,000 new rentals. We don't,
Affordable.
both. I'm just saying, to be honest with you, we need 250,000 more rentals. We don't need more condos.
Right.
We need more rentals. And obviously, a lot of them I would like to see to be affordable. But we need rental apartments.
You know, the condos, and of course in your borough, you've had a recent thing with these tall towers that overlook the park and cast shadows. But more than that, they're very high, expensive apartments. And a lot of them seem to be sold to people who don't live even in the country. So does that mean they're not paying income taxes? They may be living in a building that has a tax exemption on the property, but they're not even paying income taxes if they're not working here?
That came up at a hearing that was put together by Community Board 5. It was an excellent discussion. About 600 people showed up, and people like Peg Breen, head of the New York Landmarks Conservancy, and to the credit of Gary Barnett, head of Extel, who built that big, tall
Tall
building, 157, he showed up. And the people who, there's two arguments. Obviously, you need some of those people who pay those large condo prices and potentially pay other services in the city of New York, but their income tax would be paid where they are resident.
Yeah. So it's a whole project.
It's a project.
Yeah.
But I think that the way that de Blasio has talked about it, Mayor de Blasio, to a certain extent, is mandatory inclusionary zoning. Thing is, I don't know exactly what that means. And so that's where we need to see what the
I think a lot of people
program
don't
is.
know that, right?
Right.
Because now a builder can build, and if he provides a certain percentage of that for affordable housing, then he can build higher or bigger.
Depends
or
on the
something.
zoning. In other words,
Yeah.
what a lot of developers do is they like to build tall, and they like to do it where they don't have to go to the community board
Right.
or the city, because if the zoning allows them to do that,
That's known as of right.
they don't have to come to us.
Yeah.
But if they build, Gary Barnett built down by the Hudson River, and we did get a great deal of affordable housing out of that because he had to come for a change of zoning.
And it's happening also on 57th Street, 606 West 57th Street, the largest single apartment building to be built in the city.
Right.
It's hard to comprehend
It
that.
is very, very big, and not
Yeah.
particularly attractive
Yeah,
in terms of
right.
its.
Yeah.
But we need more affordable housing, and it has to be permanent. People have to be very careful to add that word.
So and the rental is more permanent?
Well, you have to make sure that when you're negotiating, as you are in any change of zoning, that it's a permanent change, that the housing will be permanent, because you know how fast 20 or 30 years goes, because we've been through those.
Yeah.
And that's what the past, often 80/20s as they're called, were only for the life of the abatement, and that's not sufficient.
And the Mitchell-Lamas were bought out by developers?
Unfortunately, a lot of the Mitchell-Lamas, in our district, yours and mine, there were over 30 co-op, affordable, and rentals. And they're down now to about 3 or 4 that are not private, because they have paid off the mortgage. And under the old Mitchell-Lama laws, we need a new Mitchell-Lama program. Under the old Mitchell-Lama laws, if you paid off the mortgage, then you were entitled to go private. So the people who lived there, when you were in the council and I was in the council, they can stay. But any person who unfortunately dies or moves, that apartment becomes a market apartment, and it goes for $5,000 or $6,000 a month in a building that should be for families, middle-income families.
The Mitchell-Lama was designed, state legislation, primarily, only to provide affordable housing, right?
Yeah, and it was quality housing. As you know, people like Doris Rosenblum came out of it.
She was a legendary manager of Community Board 7. Amazing.
And an organizer, housing
Yeah.
organizer.
Yeah. So do you think housing is the major challenge to in the borough?
I think a major challenge in Manhattan is the lack of affordable housing and to preserve the housing we have. Yes, that is number one. I mean, people also want to maintain their mom and pop stores. That's another challenge. They also want the schools to be not crowded and quality, and they also want quality of life. That's something that, between the noise and, bus service for the seniors, they're all same issues on the council, just bigger.
In the district. So how do you get around? I mean, how do you do all these things? You've reorganized your office to have 2 deputy borough presidents.
Correct.
And what are they going to do?
Well, one deputy borough president, Aldrin Bonilla, who came from a CUNY deanship in Washington Heights. He is in charge of the community boards, and he's in charge of the constituent offices, which is very huge. He's also on the pension board. And the other is Joe Garba, who came from Albany. He was director of the Albany office for Mayor Bloomberg, and he is in charge of budget issues and appointments and many other aspects of the office. So they have a division and many, many people under them and real jobs.
So it's going to be, you're covered pretty much.
Well, we have a staff of about 50 people totally, some who are civil service and others whom we hired, and it's very diverse, which makes me so happy.
And then you're going to a meeting with the chancellor of the school. Is she the chancellor?
Chancellor Farina.
Yeah, but she's called the chancellor.
She's called the chancellor.
What are your concerns with public education?
Well, I have a lot. Certainly, we want to make sure that I think that you pre-K is a good idea. Universal pre-kindergarten is a good idea. But as you know, in Manhattan, where we have 6 districts, in terms of school districts, different than community districts, a lot of them are very overcrowded. So where are you going to put UPK? Are you going to put UPK in the community-based organizations or in a school, but you can hardly find a closet in some of the school districts. So UPK location, and then of course all the teachers and the hiring, that's one issue. I'm a big supporter of arts education, and we are the borough of culture, the city of culture. I am afraid there are still many schools that don't have proper teaching. People are teaching in license. I don't know that that's all going on, the music and the art. And then how do we bring in even more cultural institutions to do that? And then finally, I've always believed that quality, culturally appropriate mental health, where you have somebody whom you can talk to, maybe a social worker, somebody beyond the absolutely overworked counselor who's trying to get you the right curriculum and the classes and into high school, or even if it's a high school teacher, counselor, trying to get you into college. So you need somebody there, in addition to the nurse and the doctor and the school physical health. You need somebody to talk to. So I also think that should be a priority. And then teachers can have more support, and parents have support, and kids have support.
You're a great introducer, right? You find something and you put people together and they come up with a product.
We try.
So do you have some suggestions about, for instance, the mental health? How are we going to provide it?
We've been, even in the council, I tried so hard. We finally got Chancellor Dennis Walcott. He put into the whole city $20 million to build some new spaces, literally, in some of the high schools. And I was interested when I read about it that it was moving forward. He actually put a community organizer in one of the high schools in the Bronx. I was really excited because when we visited 4 or 5 high schools in Harlem, when we were working on this in the council, that had, from Harlem Hospital, phenomenal staffing. African-American male social worker, wonderful woman psychiatrist. The teachers, the principal were absolutely floating in terms of the quality of the class teaching, because there was somebody when God help us, incest, domestic violence, all the issues at home.
Just any violence.
Right. There was somebody to talk to, and then that child could perform better. And the parents would come in.
You talk about that in the past tense. Is it not no longer happening?
We need to have more of it.
Oh, you're saying it's still there.
There are so few schools that have this quality.
It's an important thing when you think about it. It's a basic thing to all the gun violence in all the schools across the country. Yeah. It should be a national program.
Yeah, and just, you have a child who's got challenges at home, and it's not possible for the teacher to deal with them. And kids, they're not going to, you can recommend that they go, like, to their wonderful Ryan Health Center, but they don't always go. They don't go.
Does the city pay Harlem Hospital to provide that service?
There is a patchwork now of funding.
I see.
I know St. Luke's Roosevelt do some in some of the high schools. Columbia Presbyterian does some. It's patchwork, and that's one of the problems.
So we have to see if we can do more. When you talked about the space, it brought me back to days and years ago with daycare centers that the city built and then found, as the neighborhoods changed, that they couldn't fill some of those sites that they own. So it presents a big problem, doesn't it?
Well, now, of course, they'd probably like to have that space.
Yeah.
We'll have to see. Everyone knows that pre-K makes sense in terms of the outcomes after high school and college. But, there are challenges. The mayors are making some announcements today as to how to overcome them. So we'll just be helping him in Manhattan.
What about the space that charter schools are taking? And what about charter schools generally?
Well, as you know, at Brandeis,
it's a dilemma.
It is. At Brandeis High School, I tried with a pro bono law firm and with the community board's unanimous support and all the parents not to have a charter school elementary go into a high school building. Because, there was a high school kiln, and there was a high school gym, and a high school cafeteria. And it is crowding out the high schools that are in that. So I lost that fight. I do think that there should be, if everybody in the neighborhood feels that there shouldn't be a charter school in that building, that shouldn't happen.
Right.
So let's see whether the mayor and the chancellor have different proposals. I think that many of the schools where a charter school has gone in some cases, the art room is in the basement. I know that for a fact, with no light in the regular school. You can't do that. I've seen one charter child group take on a group of regular public school, and they're crying. That's not what we're all about. So the way it works now, I don't think with this pushing is not right. Are there some good charter schools? Yes. I mean, you have to give Harlem Children's Zone credit. They never went into a public school. They're doing well. I like RBI seems to be doing well. Depends on the charter school, I think.
Yeah. And that, of course, with the charter schools in the schools, it's so comparable in a way to putting pre-K in them. I mean, you can't put a pre-K in Brandeis High School.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I mean, I think it's crazy to have
Yeah.
an elementary school and 3 high schools.
So it's a major problem.
It's huge.
Are they going to have pre-K in somebody's house?
Well, I think they can use the community-based organizations.
Yeah.
But if you already have a small pre-K, right, now, like Goddard Riverside does, they have certain income restrictions. So what's going to happen if you have public money and no income restrictions to the school that has the income restriction? Is that okay? And how do you do the teaching? I mean, there are little logistics that have to be worked out.
I know you're going to not like this thing, but you are an elected official who is much more interested in policy than in politics, right?
Yes.
And so when you discuss all the difficulties with the pre-K, that's something we haven't heard of before. And it's realistic. And how do we have that become more common with other elected officials?
Well, you know, I think what I want to say to everybody is you got to do your homework, you know, and I think if you do your homework and then you bring all the stakeholders together, you can come up with some product that makes sense. Example, even more challenging are these developments, as you brought up earlier. So we should start with the Community Board 11, for instance, in East Harlem now and say, okay, you have a whole lot of vacant land.
Yeah.
What do you want to see there? And who are the stakeholders, you know, bring in, as we suggested earlier, Jonathan Rose to volunteer his time, which I'm sure he would, or bring in somebody who knows about affordable housing and say, okay, what would work here? And how do you do the financing? And what does the community want? So I'm saying the same thing with pre-K. To the mayor's credit, he's been talking about it for a year. So everyone should think, but bring the people together, all the stakeholders, and CBOs, the unions, the teachers, the parents, and say, okay, what would work for this neighborhood? Because I think each neighborhood is different.
But people, I think, have the expectation that pre-K is going to start next September.
Well, we'll see.
There's how can it possibly start?
It's a
the
huge
state
number.
hasn't done its budget yet.
Right. It's a huge number of kids, too. Huge.
Yeah, the city hasn't done its budget. Right, so it's a very difficult kind of thing. Have we ever asked the developers how they would build? I mean, do they all say that the inclusionary housing is their answer to building? Or are they realistic to understand it's not enough?
The only thing I've heard from developers is what you stated, which is that they are interested in affordable housing and they'll build it, but they'd like to build very tall.
But can they still get, well, it's only in Manhattan, isn't it, that they can't do off-site?
Depends on the 2008, the state passed an inclusionary zoning, not mandatory.
Right.
And it was very underutilized. We did use it at Riverside Center in the Extel development. We did use it, and we got units, a lot of units on site and some off site.
Is he still doing the separate entrances?
In one building, yes, but not the ones we did for our project. Yes, that was the old 1992 final number from the old Trump, what I call the Trump Penn South or whatever we called
Trump,
it then.
Yeah, we used to call it just Trump, I guess.
Trump, yeah.
Trump. No, we called it Riverside South.
Riverside South.
That major battle.
It kept changing names. But the answer is the mandatory inclusionary zoning would be a new program. So the old program that was from 2008, only in certain areas, you get obviously a little bit more FAR for it, floor area ratio, but it wasn't utilized a lot because it's not mandatory.
Yeah.
It's only when you'd have to go through the ULURP.
I see. So
So they try not to go through the ULURP.
Right. But we have to be vigilant.
Well, if it's mandatory, then I don't know what this would look like, but that would be different.
These tall buildings, I mean, what worries me is not the shadows, but the safety. And, you know, we see all these sheds up now around buildings because I think it was a Barnard student who got hit by falling,
It was.
yeah, marble. In response to that one incident, basically, we passed 11, what was it? It's a
Local 11.
local
I don't
law
know
11,
the year, but long
which
time.
insists now on periodic inspection and repair of the outsides of buildings. But the Extell building on 57th Street has already caused 57th Street to be closed twice. Once for the crane falling, and the other for some ice falling off the building. And we've had ice falling off other buildings. So are we going to pay attention, you think, to the safety?
I think it's an issue.
It's
Not only did it fall off of 57th Street, but the entire Lower West Side Highway was closed the other day because it fell off of the World Trade Center building. Ice. Very tall building, it's a commercial building.
Right.
So that was not a problem I think that people
Have looked at yet.
So yes, I think, there has to be some medium between everything being built extremely tall. That's the only way to provide affordable housing. We have to look at this. I do want unions, to be union labor, because I
Right.
think that's a good thing, particularly for the tall buildings.
Right.
But we have to come up with something that's more reasonable.
So you're enjoying this job?
I love working with the folks I'm working with. I love the other borough presidents, and just like, like you, I would want to make a difference.
And you've had many years in public service.
I go back, not as far as you, Ronnie Eldridge,
Oh,
but I
please.
go back to working at the Parks Department for John Lindsay.
That's incredible. Well, thank you very much. I think the residents of Manhattan are very lucky. And since you like the borough presidents and the other boroughs, maybe they're as lucky. And combined, you're going to help us in the city to make it more livable and continue to be livable. Thank you.
Do the best I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gale Brewer.
Thank you, Ronnie.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.